I'm Jay Fabuzzi at Fulton State Community College, with oversee the Veterans Program Department.
We're going to talk about veteran services, veterans offices, veterans orientations, those type of things. I see a few friendly faces in the crowd that have been down this process as well. So please jump in with your expertise. See Mary back there, and Eric here, and a few others. Please make this an interactive discussion, because it's really how do you get these things started and some things to think about as you go back to your campus in this space. Let's start off there. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is why are we doing this? Because the governor and said so, and the law was passed. This is a very good reason to do that, and that's probably why a lot of folks are here. But I would tell you, if that's your only motivation, then you're going to struggle with this as you go down through that. That is a fundamental question you should probably ask on your campus. Why do we want to do this? Because that's going to also look at how do you build an office? How do you pick a point of contact that you have to do by the law? Where should that person sit? Those type of things. We're gonna talk a little bit about that today. But to look at what's going on, this is not a new thing, this law. Going all the way back to 2008 with the GI promise, the state has been guiding us along on things that we should be doing, things that we had to do, and best practices along those ways. So I'm not sure what your background is or how far you go back with it, but this predates me. But I just wanted to show that a lot of this information has been going on the campuses with guidance from the regents and above, from legislature, state, those type of things. We can talk about any of those as you go through today. We'll talk about a little bit about the value of the veterans on your campus and classroom, and you heard a little bit about that in the last session. Why I believe it's the right thing to do. We can talk about multiple ways around that and how you present that on your campus. Building trust with the veterans. So whatever you're doing is accepted on your campus. Economic impact that is already here, and then part to go with what our state is trying to do. We want folks to graduate and stay in the state of Ohio and keep talent in Ohio. So start off, probably the big one that you're at this session for, the single point of contact required by the law, and it cannot be a VA certifier. Does everyone understand what does anyone not know what a VA certifier is in the room? Okay, you want to explain it?
Yeah, sure. Your VA certifier, we see that they're housed in different offices across different institutions. But that's your go-to person that is taking that credit that a veteran student is going to be taking that semester underneath the GI Bill program or any other VA program, and they're actually certifying those credits to the VA so that student can get basic housing allowance, book money, in their tuition paid for. So that's a very busy position.
There's seats up here. Feel free to grab them. You're not going to disturb us at all. So, there's that question of where should it sit. Why? But again, why are you doing this? If you look at the day-to-day work that this group is going to do, as Jay just described, you're going to have a certifier. If you want people to come to your campus and use benefits, you have to have a certifier. Someone that can do that paperwork, and it is very labor-intensive paperwork to get this. It's about 20 to 30 minutes per student per semester, and then every time they make a change. So they drop a class, they add a class, you have to recertify them every time they do that. So you can start to add up the time. I see a lot of folks that do this work or have them in their office shaking their heads, yes. It is why we were adamant when this law was going through that a bunch of us went down and testified that this lead person should be separate from the certifier, because we know what the certifiers do, and they're already overwhelmed, most likely on your campus. They may be a part-time person in financial aid, in the bursar, in the registrar, or somewhere else. They're probably doing 90% of their time or more on the veterans anyway, and they need this. But this person is the one that should work policies and programs, big issues on your campus, and be that single point of contact for your leadership and those kind of folks. So you really can't do both of those jobs. But if you go back to that question and why are you doing this, that will help you figure out where does it sit. Can it sit in student life? Can it sit under the provost? Can it sit in your enrollment services? Yes, to all those questions. It can also be a person who is not full-time doing that. So you could take an administrator or someone you already have and give them this responsibility as long as they are not the primary certifier on your campus. That meets the intent and the letter of the law. Back to that discussion, I can tell you what we did in our campus. We determined we were doing all of these things for veterans, and we did this a couple years ago, to help them succeed in their classes and to graduate. And once we had that clarity across those various areas I talked about, we decided the office should be under the provost. So that is where the office sits, with a direct line to the provost, the vice provost, and the provost. It has a dotted line to our vice president of student life and our vice president of enrollment services. Who's all the bursar, registrar, financial aid, those areas. And if we look at those three, they encompass everything on our campus except athletics or our medical side. But they encompass everything a student's going to come in contact with. So this office and this person can reach into and work with those folks in those areas to solve problems quicker and without forming big committees, which is what we had before that. Most of you are probably at a stage of either we're overwhelmed, we have a working group, we have a task force, or we have an office, or we're somewhere in that spectrum today. So that's, I want to give your example, because we both did this about 2 years ago.
Yeah, I've been there to college for about 2 years. My position was newly created, a manager of veteran services. And you really need to have, like Mike said, that direct line to higher leadership to get processes put in place, especially dealing with finances, student accounting type of issues. And we actually just realigned. We report directly to the Dean of Student Life now, which having that voice and having that extra, has made a huge difference for us for getting stuff accomplished. So.
I have a bullet up there that says university price of admission, and that's back to that person that's certifying and doing that. If you want to succeed with veterans, that's what I call the price of admission. And you need to get that right. Because I mentioned earlier about building trust with the veteran. If you can't get their benefits right, they can't concentrate on being a student. I liken it to those who served in the military. When we send people out in the military for war or humanitarian assistance, we told them, when you leave, we will take care of your family and your money will be correct. So you can concentrate on whatever your mission is. Well, their mission now is to go to school. And if they're worried about their money and their benefits all the time and it's late, by the way, the VA doesn't pay on your timeline. The VA pays when the VA pays. And your system may be sending emails every day or letters to their house saying you haven't paid your bill. You can't register for classes. By next Friday, you can't attend class anymore because you haven't paid your bill. You can't pick up your football tickets, whatever it might be. Something is happening in your system because the bill hasn't been paid. It's not their fault the bill hasn't been paid. So we took a hold harmless action, as many of you have, put an indicator in the system to take that away from them. That's a policy that a person like this can work. But again, that must get correct up front. And it's not sexy. It's not something Ohio State can put on the cover of their book saying, look, we serve veterans, and here's a picture of that person certifying and typing that in. That's not what you want to highlight typically, but if you don't get that right, I will tell you the veterans don't care about anything else you do on the campus. All these great programs we're going to talk to you about, they could care less.
And you remember too that these benefits have been earned. This is not an award. This is something that's been earned through a lot of hard work and sacrifice. So we want to make sure we get it right for them.
It's actually an earned entitlement like Social Security is. It's not financial aid. It's not a grant. That's what it is. And you heard the one student talking about the personal debt. That's why the VA system has that set up like that, is because that's an individual earned entitlement with the VA that soldier, sailor, Marine, airman, Coast Guardsman has earned, or their family member if they've passed it on. Some of those things listed there are what this single point of contact can be doing for you, and I would argue should be a part of whoever you appoint into this role. Again, it's more the big picture stuff. It's engaging with the university on issues. You may have heard about the tuition assistance memorandum of understanding that many of us signed recently with the federal government, with the DoD, or the principles of excellence, or the 8 keys of success that your president was asked to sign. Who's working that on your campus? Probably a multitude of people, but would it make sense to have someone who's familiar with military and veterans issues on your campus and be the lead for that? Should they advise your president, your provost, those kind of folks. When the National Guard, I know Julie just walked in, when they say they want to have you speak on their campus or come out to a base or whatever it might be, who's advising your president on that? Why should they go to this one and not that one? You know, we do that in a lot of other areas on the campus, but typically we don't do that here. Education and outreach for both your staff and your faculty you should be learning about military veterans issues and out into the community. This is things to think about.
Mike?
Yes.
Yeah, can we go back to that one for just a second?
Sure.
With the roles and responsibilities, that last line can inhale a lot of time for that veterans, whatever the title is. And depending on the number of veterans that you have at your college or university, that can actually be overwhelming. And there's a problem with trying to balance what you really need with regards to policies, work with faculty, et cetera, and also doing one-on-one with the veterans there. And so my thought for those of you here who's still working on this is take a look at the number of veterans you have at the university and ask yourself honestly, can one person do that solo? Or do you have a battalion-sized number of veterans there at the university with one person handling the battalion? Doesn't work as well as it should, or well as it should.
Yeah. And there's other areas that I don't have on here. I could be full-time in development if my development staff had their way. They would pull me in there to raise money for this. I could work with our career services full-time, working with employers who want to come and visit Ohio State and hire veterans. That's a big one that's really kicked up in the last year. So this person, especially once they are known, they're gonna start to get pulled in a lot of different areas.
Committees are gonna just step up, and next thing you know, you're gonna be sitting on PLA right now. That's a huge one. How are we gonna develop those, military transfer agreements?
Yes. Yeah, because under PLA, prior learning assessment, there is a military subset. I would argue the other two subsets have military implications as well, with testing and with portfolio. Okay, veterans orientations. How many folks have them? About half, which is about what we got from the survey. I would tell you it should not, and ours, it does not replace your academic orientations. Most of these students are going to come in as transfer. So if you have a separate transfer orientation, that's what they're attending rather than a first-year student. You can do it a lot of different ways. A separate day, a separate session, and add on to the transfer orientation. There's multiple ways that are out there. On the toolkit, we've listed some schools that we know are doing it. We've listed their slides. So you can go to see those and feel free to take anything you want from toolkit along that. But what we do believe is it should focus on the student veteran. What is on your campus that a student veteran has access to that may be different? What is in your community that potentially, depending on where you're at and what is out there. But I will tell you, all 88 counties in Ohio have a Veterans Service Commission office. We're one of 3 states that have that. That's a great resource to tap into and bring into this. The VA has regional folks around the entire state. They can come in to your areas and do this once or twice a year. They will want to do this to talk about it. But some unique issues. I'll give you one: disability services, and this is a confusion. The military members are, they know what disability means. It's usually a negative thing. It's keeping them from their mission. They may have been separated out of the military with disability ratings in the VA system, a 10%, a 20%, a 50% disability. So they come on our campus and they're terrified to go talk to our disability services because they think it may affect that disability rating and their money. So that's one of the first things we tell them is those two things have nothing to do with each other. You can see our disability services every day. It'll never affect your VA rating. You can see our doctors and our nurses on our campus as a student. You also have the right to see the VA doctors and nurses. You have the right to let them talk to each other, keep them apart, whatever you want to do. We talk about disability services being private on our campus and to think about them differently than they ever have, to get a little more time to take a test in a quiet area. Those are not disability services they had in the military. I know you all have had some experiences with that counseling as well.
Yeah, counseling, two very important relationships for that single point of contact, disability services and counseling services. And one of the things I try to do is I try to remove that stigma between that student as they're going through this transition. That you are here to be, as a college student, and anything that we can accommodate you with to make you a successful college student, that's our mission. And getting extra time on a test or quiet place to take a test, that's stuff that's going to make you more successful.
Anybody else that's got an office going? Mary or Bob or anyone? You want to talk about a few experiences you've had with that?
Well, I would say
things that you bring in?
Sure. So I work at the University of Toledo, and for example, our counseling services on campus, sometimes a student would go down there for some readjustment counseling. Yet that counselor would maybe find out until the 5th or 6th appointment that they're a veteran now. So the University of Toledo, we have an MOU with the Vet Center. We're fortunate to have a Vet Center about 5-10 minutes from campus. And so our counseling center is.
You want to explain what a Vet Center is first?
So Vet Center offers free transitional counseling to veterans of armed conflict. I'm not sure how many we have in the state of Ohio, but we, like I said, are fortunate to have one near campus. So our counseling center on campus now has added that question, have you served in the military, to their new intake form. So now if they check yes, they're told, hey, we can help you here on campus, but obviously if you'd like to speak with someone on veteran-specific issues, the Vet Center will bring their folks to our campus. And similar question on the intake form for disability services, as well as a question on military service.
We brought to the state about 18 months ago, it's called the Center for Deployment Psychology. That came to train counselors from the state of Ohio. And we had a day where a lot of your counselors could have come in and received that training. It is something that you can request from the Department of Defense. It's through a contract, and they will come train your counselors on your campus on veterans issues, military issues. So what does this current crop of veterans look like? What do they experience? Those type of things. And they can help with that.
One of the things our Military Veterans Association did a few years ago is we went to them and said, what do you want? What services do you want on campus? And one of the primary things was a counselor who was experienced in TBI and PTSD and all that.
Yep.
So we took a long time, and we finally hired a counselor that worked in the military, the VA, in those specialties for 5 years. So we hired somebody experienced, and so we're in close proximity to his office and also our office accessibility. So if we see somebody who needs some help or has an issue, we literally walk them to that office. We have 5 veterans that work in our office, so they're comfortable with them talking about these issues, and we can get them the help. So we found that having those veterans available and having somebody who's a specialist in that area works really well.
Yeah. Relationships, especially with the VA, are important. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on, but those community-based CBOCs, community-based outreach clinics, basically VA sub-offices are very important. They do have a psychology doctor that's there that for veterans to treat. And then if you're lucky enough to be by a large VA, working with their counselors there as well is a huge plus. We meet at least once a quarter. We all sit down and talk about student issues and so forth. But that's a big piece right there as well.
Having your VA certifier brief at this is very important to talk about the money. We lay out and say, hey, for the next coming year, here's what you're going to get every month, whether you're 100%, 90%. And oh, by the way, in February or December, we're not in school a full month, so you're going to get a prorated amount. This is what that means to you. This is how much money you're going to get. If you don't go in the summer, you don't get any housing allowance. If you do go part-time, this is what you'll get. So they can start thinking about things like that and planning, because they're living off of that stipend that the VA is giving them in most cases.
I was just going to ask out of curiosity, do you know at this point data or numbers about how many veterans are using accessibility or disability services?
We had about a 2% increase on our campus over the last few years. It's lower than we thought. I think partly the best guess we've gone through on the physical disability side is they're doing a much better job with the VA and with the DoD of keeping them nearby the rehabilitation hospitals and keeping them longer. And what many of them we're starting to see is they've started college classes in San Antonio and DC around Walter Reed, and then as maybe they're going to spend a year there doing rehabilitation, so they'll start and they'll just decide they want to finish there. So we're not seeing as many physical disabilities as we thought around the country at campuses, but we're seeing a lot of other things coming in. So a lot of invisible injuries, which is kind of a hallmark of this war. Okay, student veteran organizations. There is going to be a session on this in the afternoon, the third group of sessions from student veterans themselves across 5 campuses that started veterans organizations. but I think this is something you should consider. The law says you have to allow it, but there's benefits to actively helping it occur as well. SVA alignment is Student Veterans of America. That is something they could choose to align with. It's the national organization. We have 3 groups on our campus, and I'll explain all those, but our main one is aligned as an SVA chapter. It takes a while to get started and get going, and you're gonna see it do peaks and valleys and ups and downs. You may wanna look for who should be the advisors, help them with that. Do you find veterans that are on the campus? Do they want a veteran advisor from a faculty or staff, depending on what your rules are? They may or may not. They may have very good ideas, or they have someone who's passionate about it and they want to do that. And if you're trying to start it, that's really the key. Getting a small group of passionate folks that are going to be there more than 6 months or a year would be nice to get it off the ground and started, because you need that core group. But it is going to change over time. About every 2 years, that passionate leadership group is going to graduate. So something that is familiar to them in the military is you should be developing the people behind you to take your place. It's something that's integral to military service. It's a little different for higher education than what we're used to in the military, but that's something they need to start thinking about from day one. Because they may get this organization great started, and 2 years later it dies, because they all graduate. So that's stuff they're gonna need help with.
Another piece too is putting a steering committee together, engage your faculty and your staff, veterans at your school, like we talked about this morning, and put a committee together, to help that group out. And, they got a question about something or an event they want to do, fully engage them. It's just more resources to add.
I mentioned niche groups. The other 2 groups that we have on our campus have one that's an MBA group. We have about 25 veterans getting MBAs through our College of Business. And then our law school has between 8 and 10 veterans or active duty military members going through there. So they're more focused on professional associations and employment and those types of issues, but they like to have that group come together. In fact, there's now been a national group around MBA veterans that holds a job fair once a year that only invites veterans that are getting MBAs. And it's over 1,000 across the country that go to this job fair. So it's starting to grow, as you can see these kind of numbers. One big way to utilize them, though, is listen to them. I say they are my official advisory group on the campus. So anytime the university is thinking about doing something, we ask them, is this something you want? Is this something you need? And you're going to get very different answers across campuses. You heard about veterans lounges. Some want them, some don't. Some want the offices near a union. Our students said we want a lounge and we want it nowhere near the union. Farthest from the union you can get is fine with us. But other campuses are different, so that you need to engage them on things and ask them questions.
What do you think? Our experience here is that the Vets League actually was very powerful and created the office, like expanded the office. They got the signatures. They pushed the president. They established my position. I mean, they were great. But now they're in a dip, right? But I need student input. Is it? I'd like to start a student advisory group that we in the office can control, because then we can maintain some stability as opposed to relying on the Vets League, which I don't want to control. I mean, I want to support them, but I don't want to dictate them at all.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, that's definitely.
I mean, I say that that's my official advisory group, but I also go out to other groups, because right now I have a lot of single males in the veterans group that are in the leadership, and that's fine. The previous years I had women. I want a mix. I want married, I want single, I want all of that, because about just under half of ours have a family, probably very similar to yours, whether it be spouse, kids, both, whatever it might be. 27% of the veterans on campuses today are women. They only make up about 10 to 12% of the armed forces, so they're using these benefits at a much higher rate on your campus. We think one reason in Columbus is we have a women's clinic with our VA, but we don't know that, because we're about 28%. But I want their input on things. So we try and reach across groups or just pull certain ones that we know are active, or, Sure. So I agree, I think that's a great idea. And that's another key point that we mentioned, is the veterans themselves can help on your campus get these things established, because they have a need. I've heard some schools, like, I don't know if they're here, but they've gone to the boards of trustees at the open meetings and stood up and said, you're not doing this or that, or, you know, those kind of things. I know when we were looking at our process, we had a very unfavorable article hit in the Columbus Dispatch about how veterans' GI Bill benefits were being processed, and I was brought in because I was building the plan and said, yes, everything in it is true. Now, we're building a plan to get there, but it is true. As we said when we started our process, we needed this about 3 years ago. We're behind. So that was a negative in the press, but it was actually a positive to help our campus push to get what was needed on the campus.
Not only veterans, too, but military students, you know, reservists, active duty folks. We don't have too many active duty students in our school, but reservists, that is a great conduit to find out what's going on. You know, we all went through the, 8 months ago, the tuition assistance, crisis. That affected the Army pretty hard. It was a complete 180 from the way it used to be. And, me still being in the reserves, I heard, I kind of got the real scoop on what was going on, but for a majority of folks that don't have that opportunity, plug into these guys and girls and ask them what's going on. It's gonna help your institution tailor, better policies to serve them better.
James, you mentioned something about starting a steering committee. I would also just encourage folks to have a mission statement for your military service center, your SVA. We're all mission oriented veterans. It's good to have that. When I came to UT, we didn't have a mission statement for our military service center. So we brought some of the students and staff together and sat down and laid that out. So now when students come to our office, they clearly see what our mission statement is. SVA is their mission statement. What are we going to do to help them? So I would encourage folks to look at that as well as steering committee.
Yeah, they see that. That's one of the first things they see when they look at our website is, hey, these are the same values that I had when I was in the military. Those same guidelines. The VA has their own set of values. We kind of tailor our mission statement, our purpose to meet those guidelines, and that makes there's a level of trust there that's going to be earned in initial contact. So.
Having a website, as simple as that, for folks that Google Kent State veterans. If something doesn't pop up, okay, that's the next school in Ohio I want to go to. That's literally what's happening. So the more information you can give them, we designed a website, brought in the students, they said, get rid of all of this, redo all this. So we went back and redid most of it around what they want. Our admissions officer just told me a couple weeks ago that we have more non-veterans using our page to get to admissions because they like the way it goes than the admissions page. I said that's because students designed it. That's my only answer to that thing. So, but you need to have a page, and you all do, by the way, because part of what I set up for the toolkit is a list of all 36 schools in Ohio, what you have. Some of them were harder to find than other ones, I will tell you, but that's what I did for every one of your schools. I just Googled your school and the word veterans. And then I tried to find, some of them have 6 or 7 places it goes to. And it's got pieces of each in admissions and financial aid and the registrar. That's tough. I listed what I thought was the best. So when you go back and look at the toolkit, that's what's listed. If you want to change it, please let the regents know what the best place for them to land is, and we will do that. But it's something to think about. And it's common. You may remember the regents sent out a question that we all had to answer at the university, and I don't know if you were all involved in it or not, but the question was around academic credit and satisfactory academic progress. Because the veterans are coming in, you want to give them a lot of the credits that they have. You put it on a transcript, they may now be hurt in financial aid because they have a ton of credits and they're not showing progress. So an SAP process. Well, what we heard from a lot of the schools was, I couldn't answer it myself, I had to get 3 other offices together. So that's a good thing, that it's showing the span of where these issues are, but it's also, does that person know what we're doing over here? So it created a lot of conversations on the college around an issue that's central to veterans. And I think shows the need for what we're talking about here at the conference today. Okay, back to having resources and ideas. If you can't answer that first question, I would argue, again, you're going to struggle with this. Where do we put it? What do we build? Do we have a lounge? What are we going to do on our campus? How do we get money for it? Where does the money come from potentially? Is it going to be internal university money? I'm going to try to do this all with donor money, a mix of it? What are you going to do? But if you can't answer why you're doing it, I think you will struggle with this continually. I don't know how many folks have a task force, a committee. Anybody have something like that on your campus around veterans right now? It is a great place to start. If you're looking to where to go with this, is that group. Because you've got folks that are passionate about it, that have come together to help work these kind of issues. The hard part, I would tell you, is at the end of that meeting, they all go back to their full-time job. And it is none of their jobs to be the advocate for veterans, for military members, or family members on your campus. And that can be a struggle. That's what this lead person should be, though, and they should be part of that committee, and then they go work that issue for your campus. But certainly look at that. You can look, what else does the university do? Do you have a employee resource group, if you will, around veterans? As far as hiring, retaining military veterans on your campus, is that something your HR has even talked about? Do you want one?
Yeah, I mean, do they know how many veterans are working at campus?
Do you even have them identified on your campus? You know, we can point you towards companies that do a very good job. The Ohio National Guard runs an employee advisory council that meets every quarter. A great place, and what they talk about is hiring and retaining veterans and military members. That's all they talk about, and it's HR leads from big organizations around Ohio. You can get dialed into a lot of support areas for that. That is something you have to start thinking about. Veterans lounges, you heard a couple of the students mention that. That's a great idea to get them together, but we also have to, as far as the universities understand, part of what we're trying to do is walk that fine line between helping them make that adjustment, but to step over and make that adjustment to being a civilian, a college student. I get asked a lot, well, how do you know if your office is working? And I say, one of the ways is when they stop coming to us for everything. They let the university system work and they're comfortable with it. We've helped them make that transition. Now, there may be some that, due to whatever they experienced or something that happened to them, we may have to hold their hand all the way through graduation, and that's okay. That's what all these services on your campus are for, not just veterans, but other students that have had things happen in their life. But the bulk of them, you want to make that transition. So this is a way to help with transition. Your students may or may not want a lounge. It's something to ask them. But it can keep the group segregated and hinder that in a little bit, I would tell you as well. It's just something to be aware of and look at. You want to say anything?
Budgets, budget when it comes to the lounge is a big issue. We had to get creative. We didn't have a budget. We get some reporting fees from the VA. Basically, I think $14 a student that we certify, $13 or $14 a student that we certify.
You all get that, by the way.
Yeah, we all get that based on your populations. We use some of that to offset renovations and so forth. But you got to get creative. There's nothing saying you can't go out and ask for donations from different agencies in the community. And 9 out of 10 times we'd be more than happy to donate. Refrigerator, microwave, even coffee. We get our coffee donated locally here, which is nice because veterans have to have coffee. It's just the way it works.
Our Franklin County alumni group for Ohio State has adopted our Veterans Lounge, and they provide them coffee, and then once a month they come over with fresh baked cookies and things like that. Just a way for them that they wanted to give back and do something like that, so it doesn't cost our office anything for that. We bought them a Keurig, is all we bought them to start. And we had, Student Life had a refrigerator that was coming out of a dorm, they gave us that. So there's creative ways you can do this. Creative ways to have these offices and groups as well. And it's not directly on this slide, but I wanted an academic advisor and knew we needed one, but we couldn't afford one. So what I got was our exploration office, which deals with transfer students and students that are unsure about majors. They agreed to come over 2 days a week for a couple hours a week and work out of our office. We made space for that. Counseling comes over once a week and does the same thing out of our office. We were able to show that first year, those 2 people, they were booked all the time they were there. So the second year, they gave us 4 days a week. We were able to show they were booked, and I just got a grant to be able to hire a full-time advisor for the next few years while we work on trying to get that permanently. But I could show the university data that they were being engaged. But those are some creative ways to get there. I have the thing up there called Community Advocates. It's a program we started on our campus, completely donor-based, where donors who were interested in veterans, military members, leadership, gave us money for $3,000 a student. We give the student $1,000 a semester. We call it a housing scholarship. You can call it whatever you want. It's just a way to get them the money that they can use for whatever need they have. We place them in an office on the campus. They're to be a liaison to help that office learn about military and veterans issues. And then they take what that office does and take it back to the greater community. And we give them that third $1,000 as programming for them and the office to figure out what to do a new program, change program, a social event, whatever it might be, around the campus to help veterans. It's another way to plug in back to a group. You mentioned Seth. We actually had 10 of those last year through a pretty generous donor, and we went to 20 this year, including our regional campuses. And we figure $1,000 of programming at a regional campus for the size of students is the equivalent of the $10,000 on Columbus and the size that we have. It's a scalable program that you can do. Can you find one donor for $3,000 to start something like this and see if it makes a difference? Our $3,000 was done because that's the President's Club and allows you to get football tickets. Sounds silly, but your development probably gets it too, but people call at the end of the year, I gotta give some more money for tax reasons. Oh, and our person that answers the phone is a veteran employee. She says, we have this other program, what do you think of that? Well, that sounds wonderful, here's $3,000. And then we name and say, Jay Pavuzzi is your student that you just sponsored for the year. We introduce them and they form a relationship with them. So just a creative way to get some money for programming on the campus is really what it's for. But it helps the students build that community and interact. And we put them in key offices that we know work with veterans or veterans in need.
Even too, if it's not a mentorship type of scholarship, create a scholarship. Go to your foundation or donors foundation and bring those ideas to them about, hey, would anybody be interested out there in setting up a fund for veterans? $1,300 a month BAH, especially if you have a couple kids living off the economy for basic.
Explain what BAH is.
BAH, basic housing allowance. That's what that military or veteran student's getting on their GI Bill or
In Columbus.
In Columbus, yes, roughly about $1,300.
Different on all your campuses.
So that's not a lot of money. Like I said, you got expenses, and by the way, you're not working because you're going to school. Taking 12 credits. So that's to get that money, and basically that basic housing allowance is based on the amount of credit you're taking. So to offset that, a scholarship would be great. We just started a partnership here at our school with a local organization, Fallen 15, and they came to us and they said, hey, we got some money here. We'd really like to see this go toward our veteran students. So we're going to be able to help them out a little bit more. Of course, there'll be criteria for it, but that's a good way to show that your institution, your organization is recognizing their service.
I would recommend you have a conversation with your development folks around this. In one particular area, they're going to go pull your alumni that are military veterans if they were ever tagged, and they can find that. And that's a great place to start. But as I told them, I'd like you also to think about alumni who are interested in giving money towards service and leadership, because that fits this group perfectly as well. And that's a much broader group that might be interested in donating to something like that. And that's where this idea for the community advocates actually came up. And they engaged a couple donors that were very interested in that aspect of it. So you can get creative with that as well. It doesn't have to just be, a military member, ROTC, whatever you might have that you're tracking on campus. I'd also like to mention community partnerships. The National Guard runs a ISFAC, Inter-Service Family Assistance Center Committee. A great organization that meets regionally and then meets quarterly across the state to support military members into the community. So you can get dialed into that. There is an education subcommittee on that for higher education. There's not many of us that go to that subcommittee, but that work, we helped draft some guidelines that you may have seen that came out signed by the Chancellor and the Adjutant General on recommendations for military-friendly campus things. We got that signed out of that group. That became part of the governor's recommendations that hit in December of last year. It was adopted somewhat from that, and then the legislature grabbed the governor's recommendations and put it in law. So a lot of the work that we did in that committee a couple of years ago is what is in this law that we're dealing with today.
Also with that committee too, that's a great way to get plugged into everybody. If you're starting out, you don't know who's who, you're having an event on campus, get plugged into them. They're connected with everybody else in your area for the most part. All your veterans organizations, your support organizations, family assistance organizations, state, local, and federal as well that deal with veterans and military issues. So.
Can you introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, that is I'm Colonel Julie Black. I actually manage that for the National Guard. So the Inter-Service Family Assistance Committees and then the 6 regional Inter-Service Family Assistance Committees, they're very loose, and they're really the community's mechanism or venue to get together to just basically see who's to their left and right introduce each other, and network. Very loose agendas on the main session, and then for our state level Inter-Service Family Assistance Committee, we do have some different working groups or subcommittees that focus on some very specific things. These committees are only as strong as the people that attend it. But it is a venue for everybody gets a few minutes or a minute to introduce themselves, say who they are and what they have to offer. And we're also committed to having military members there, so everybody's together in one place.
If you're not a partner, with this organization, it's a good idea to be, because most likely a large amount of Ohio National Guard veterans on your campus using tuition assistance. We have about 150 at our institution alone. So they're focused on the student and making sure that student is getting full benefits out of your tax dollars.
Find the local groups and the state groups that you can get to interact with, and you'll start to meet this network. I'm sitting here from the Veterans Workforce Program. There's a lot of folks that you'll meet through these that do all kinds of things that touch into veterans and non-veterans issues to build your network. And again, that's part back to what this person ought to be starting to do, but it's certainly locally in your group. I don't know, Bob, do you want to, you guys kind of have a consortium up around the Cleveland area that
we
gets
have,
together.
First of all of the colleges up in the Cleveland area talk with each other on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, I'm seeing with some people here, I know them coming in because we all meet on a regular basis. Josh has something usually every other year?
Every year.
Every year in July, and then we get together for coffee. We call it a coffee clash, by the way, but it's a special forces colonel who told us that was it, so that's cool. As far as ISFAC goes, there's 6 regions. I can't speak to the other regions, but Region 1, which is Northeast Ohio, meets every quarter in the evening, so it's convenient for those in the Cleveland, Akron, Kent area to attend. A lot of National Guard and Reserve units there show up. A lot of the VSOs the Veteran Service Organizations are there, and they come with food as well. But it's a convenient time just to go, let people know that you're there, but also find out who else is there, so you can get a little face time. It's really valuable.
Last point on there is talking about commencement. Does anybody recognize military veterans at commencement? Okay, so a lot of folks are already doing it. Those are just a couple of the ideas up there. You may have seen like a red, white, and blue honor cord that veterans can wear. Our veterans do an aguilet, which is a military style. You may have seen it on one of the members this morning. Our students designed it in scarlet and gray and took it to the president on their own and got it approved for commencement. Then they came to me and said, hey, we like this, we got it approved, can you pay for it? Okay, that's great. It just so happened though that our Alumni Association was looking for a way to connect with veterans, and we've been struggling to find a way to do that. So I went to them and said, hey, for about $1,200–1,300 a year for us, will you buy these for them? And they said, sure, as long as we can present them to them. So they present a little scroll with a thank you for your service and introduce themselves as the Alumni Association to them, and we hand them out to them, and they can wear them at commencement. So it's a nice partnership with them. Again, it doesn't cost us anything at the end of the day. I did fund it for 1 quarter. We were on quarters at the time. I found some money through my boss. That was very gracious. But long term, that's the partnership that we formed to do that. So I know other people are doing different things. Does anybody want to talk about what you're doing or how you fund it or anything like that?
Does anybody do a challenge points at all? Military challenge points? You guys are doing that? Yeah. We will be. Yeah. We're going to start doing that this autumn or this spring semester. And basically, everybody knows what a military challenge point is. It's usually presented by as a award of excellence from either that command team, enlisted an officer command team, to a soldier or service member that is being recognized for a good achievement. And the majority of us that have served in the military end up with these nice collections, and it's something nice to give to that student. Put the university logo on it. We're going to have our president of our college do a separate ceremony at the end of the graduation and present those points, and it brings that personal touch. To hey, good job. Thanks for having a good college experience here, and thanks for your service.
Yes.
It's something we've been thinking about. We have a company all ready to go with us on it. They're very vet friendly, so we're getting a break.
They're pretty cheap too.
Yeah.
You can get a couple hundred of these things
Yeah.
for $300 or so.
The criteria is the question. So you're going to use yours as a part of the commencement process?
Yeah.
Okay. them to
And
change.
it's whatever you wanna do, I mean,
Yeah.
there's no rules on it.
One thing we're doing at Lorraine County Community College is, we've always had a big emphasis on helping the students maximize their GI Bill. And so we train a team of advisors who understand some of the nuances of the GI Bill and how to make sure that they need to make sure to keep their grades up. We also have a university partnership where students, so we have some vets, we're doing dual degrees, and so we work with them on that. But what we're trying today, actually, is we have registration, it's the opening day. They have priority now, today, but we have, also created priority advising. So today, we have a walk-in service, but we have created these priority advising appointments that are open this week just for vets. So we have 10 of them scheduled for today. It's a pilot to see how that goes. And we're hoping it's gonna encourage them to then, turn in their cert requests early and try to change that culture. Because we have a lot of veterans who register at the last minute, and then they're upset
Yep.
because their benefits are late.
Sure.
So we're hoping that this might be a way to kind of assist them too.
Well, and that's part of, the priority registration for veterans, it's part of this law, is educating the veterans on what that means. I've already had a meeting with a couple of our student groups saying, it doesn't mean you wait until the last day and you bump everybody out, or you don't have to take 8 o'clock classes anymore, it just means your window opens early. And if you don't take advantage of that window, there is no benefit to you. Another key point you mentioned, I think the partnership with advising for veterans is so important, is if they're using GI Bill benefits, they're going to get great academic advice from their academic advisor in whatever college they're in, that may say, drop this course, take this action. And that may be the best academic advice, but it may come with a bill over here on the VA side. So we always try to tell them, talk to the academic advisor and the certification person. We go to all new advisor training, and we go to every college every year to make sure the advisors know this message as well. We're not gonna tell the student what to do, but they need to know both sides of the coin. And it still may be the best thing to do, but you're gonna owe some money back to the VA potentially, or owe other federal aid that you've already spent. You now have a bill. So they just need to understand that. And I think having the advisors to understand it is the best place, because the advisors then can say, this is great, but this comes with this also.
Essential, to have, if you do establish, and I hope you do establish a working group at the college, we call ours a GI Bill working group, make sure advising is there. It's just so, that's that much extra work that your certifying officials are gonna be doing, when they go in to certify those courses. And that's really not their job to do that.
We have just a couple minutes, take questions, or if there's other things you'd like to highlight that you're doing at your campus, please do.
So 2 things. My name is Seth Gordon, I'm the director at Wright State University. We're extremely fortunate right now to be very well resourced and to have a huge commitment from the university. So we're finishing renovations on a 1,800 square foot / 4,500 square foot new veteran and military center. Probably at a pretty sizable expense, but there'll be a grand opening on November 13th. It's just beautiful. So if anybody wants to come see what a nice center can look like, please feel free to contact me or come by. Our grand opening will be November 13th, but you can come by anytime. The one thing that we are doing that I think is working at getting our name out in the community and helping build gaps across the generations. We have a Veteran Voices Oral History project. We started and found a woman who has been doing something with the Library of Congress Veteran Voices Project for about 8 years. She taught a Veteran Voices Oral History project last spring to about 9 veterans and 1 non-veteran. The top 4 people that graduated from that class I employed, 2 of whom were employed with a joint grant from the local NPR station. All of them have been trained to gather veteran stories, and the 2 students that are doing that are now going to local VFWs and Veterans Affairs Commissions and saying, we want to gather your stories so we can keep them because they're gonna go away. What that's doing is building a very good bridge between our center and other organizations without us ostensibly going in and asking for money. And what it is doing is building a bridge between this group of veterans, the 30-year-olds who are coming out, and the former combat veterans, the Vietnam era veterans and older, and trying to get them to talk to each other. Because of course, if I told them to go talk to them because it'll be good for you, That's the last thing the veteran will do. But if you go and say, go do this for the veteran because it'll be good for their community, their family, they're doing it, and it's starting to work in a way that I hadn't really imagined. Because the advantage of hiring veterans to do this is that they're former NCOs and they don't need me to tell them what to do. So they're coming back to me and saying, hey, we went to this AMVETS meeting and they're really happy to see you. They want to know what they can do to help the center, because they're going out and looking for stories, not looking for money. So that's been a great benefit for us.
The last thing I'll say is that online toolkit is going to have a lot of information. It went live today. The Regents put it out with a lot of examples of things from schools around the country. As you have them, or if you're not, please give them to the Regents to upload. There's a bunch of us who are on this team. We've been working this, about 20 of us have been working since January with the Regents, kind of culminating today, but there'll be a lot more after that. But feel free to call any of us. If you don't mind, everybody just raise your hand if you're in a veteran's office or working around that now. And just take a look at your peers out here and get to know each other and utilize each other, because that's a great resource. Any last questions?
I just want to say some of the new things that we've done is we put a permanent POW MIA chair in our football stadium and had a military appreciation day. And you wouldn't believe the people that were not military. They were coming up and taking pictures of the chair and touching the chair and respecting it. And then also we started an American Legion post on campus. And that's allowing our alumni and a lot of donors and our faculty help our younger veterans network in the community and helping them with job searches and that sort of thing.
I was at that game. Was there any